And Eamon, is it better for you if people raise their hands to ask questions, or does shouting out work?
Yeah, either or. I will be a little delayed on the chat. I do recall there was a few chat participants last time, which I'm totally fine with. Might just be not an immediate answer, but I will get to it eventually. So raising the hands, or if there is sort of a time to speak, by all means, go ahead and speak.
Cool,
So,
thanks.
Yeah, of course. I will just start when it is best fit.
Yeah.
So thumbs up.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Alrighty. Well, welcome everyone. For those of you who joined this first session, welcome back. And for those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Eamon Rogers. I'm a chef and I've been cooking for over 13 years in independent restaurants, catering business, and private dinner parties. So I do have a lot of experience when it comes to cooking. I do also have a 3-year background from George Brown College in culinary arts, which is seen as one of the premier culinary schools in North America. So cooking is a love and passion of mine, and by everyone joining here today, I would assume that everyone else really enjoys cooking and it is sort of a passion in their lives as well. So today, our goal is just to go over sort of more professional style or kitchen techniques, you could say, just to sort of how to get organized in the kitchen, prepare yourself, and really go over some fundamental techniques, as well as sort of create a little different take on a taco versus your standard ground beef, Mexican mix and cheese, etc. So today we're going to be making flank steak tacos. We have a few different condiments, sauces, etc. So we're going to make a chipotle aioli. We're going to make some guacamole. We're going to make some pickled onions, and then there's a few extra ingredients that we can go over if there are participants that did gather those ingredients. So again, I'm open for questions at any time. Feel free to shout out, raise your hand, or simply message in the chat box. So with that being said, we can go ahead and get jumping in. So we're going to go ahead and start with our mise en place. So for those of you who are new and don't know what mise en place means, it's just a fancy French word for everything in its place. So the idea of mise en place is when you're cooking, or you're cooking something larger rather than just for yourself, it means you have everything ready to go when you start cooking. So for those of you who have been preparing a meal and you start one step and then you realize I need to chop an onion, you have to leave your stove and go chop an onion, and you have to do this and this and this. So that just eliminates all that. So when it comes down to we're going to eat, we have everything ready to go, and it's a smooth, quick, simple process. So that is one of the techniques we're going to implement today. It's called mise en place, which is everything in its place. And we're going to go ahead and get all of our ingredients ready, so when we start cooking, we are good to go. So one thing you take consideration with your mise en place is what is going to take the longest time, or what needs the most effort. And for that, today, it is going to be our protein. So we're going to marinate our protein, okay? So everyone can go ahead and get out their flank steak, New York strip, or any other style steak that they did purchase. We're also going to need a lime, some brown or white sugar, whatever you have or what you have in your house, some garlic, and some red wine vinegar, okay? So it's going to come off my face for a bit now. It's just going to go on my cutting board. Alrighty, so what I have here is I have my steak, and I have a plastic bag, just a Ziploc bag. If you don't have any of these, you can go ahead and just use a mixing bowl or anything that's going to be able to hold the steak in the marinade, okay? So what I'm going to do is I am going to take my steak out, and I'm just going to dump it straight into the bag. And we're going to create a marinade that we're going to put inside here. The reason we're doing this now is we're going to allow this steak to marinate, tenderize, and then take in all those flavors that we're adding into the steak, right? So this is going to take the amount of time that we are prepping. Certainly, you could do this overnight. That's when you would get the best results, is overnight, or even for a few days, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and put that to the side now. So for our marinade, I've just got a small bowl here. I'm going to take a tablespoon of our sugar here. Now I've got brown. And if your sugar is a little lumpy like mine, that is okay. It does happen. That is just molasses in the sugar drying up. And it will certainly come back to the liquid form once we have processed everything. So to the brown sugar, I'm going to add a tablespoon of our vinegar. And just keep in mind, this is for this marinade, and this amount of steak is for 2 to 4 people. So if you do have more steak and you are cooking for more people, you can feel free to double this recipe, okay? If I make a veggie option, would I be able to marinate? Yes, you would, Darren. What veggie option did you choose? If I can ask you that, just because it will make a difference depending on which veggie option you choose. So again, just for the time being, we've got brown sugar and we have vinegar in here. My sugar is already sort of dissolved. I'm just going to mix that up. Yes, Darren, you can do this with chickpeas. Chickpeas and Brussels sprouts are the best two to do this with marinades, just because they are a little firmer and they will adhere to the marinade a little more versus just black beans. Okay, I'm also going to add a little bit of lime juice. There's no particular measurement to this. This is sort of what you prefer. I usually like to cut a quarter of my lime. For example, that is how much I cut. So just about a quarter of the end. And I'm going to squeeze that right into the marinade. And it does help if you roll your lime, put some pressure on the full lime on the cutting board before. That will just sort of activate the juices in the pulp in there. And you'll definitely get more juice out. Okay. And then we're gonna take our garlic here. So this is for information purposes. A lot of my friends and acquaintances didn't know this, but this is a bulb of garlic. So whenever you see bulb of garlic, this is what a bulb is. And then a clove is sort of the actual smaller pieces inside the garlic. So I've actually had past clients where I said we needed about 4 cloves of garlic and they bought 4 bulbs of garlic. So it'll just, if you do have this in the future, it'll just save you from over purchasing garlic, which is not a bad thing. It's, yeah, I mean, garlic is garlic. It's great, right? So, okay. So in the marinade, we have a tablespoon of brown sugar, tablespoon of vinegar, and then a little bit of lime. For pulse sensitive, yes, it is good for the garlic lovers. So we're just going to go ahead and rough chop this garlic here. So for garlic, I like to cut both the ends off, and then sort of the skin detaches. If the skin doesn't sort of naturally detach, what you can do is you can sort of make a slit on the back of the sort of the fatter side, make a small slit, and then you can peel off the skin that way. So a good rule of thumb for garlic, the stickier it is, the fresher the garlic. So it's something to keep note. Fresher garlic will be more potent, just so you are aware in the future. So the garlic, nothing special here. I'm just going to start by cutting lengthwise, as thin as possible. Okay. And then we're going to go the opposite direction. We're going to go widthwise. So we're just going to basically create small little dices or cubes of garlic. Okay. And I will just show you the importance. So just going to go ahead and add that straight into our marinade. So when we are cutting things, it is important that we have our object or whatever we're cutting down. And when we cut, we make sure we want to sort of peel our fingers in. All right. So if you do sometimes make a long stroke, your finger's not sticking out and it won't catch your finger. If it's sticking in, you're just going to shave your knuckles. You're not going to do any damage to your hands, which you don't want. And I have seen, and it is not a pretty sight. So trying to avoid that as much as we can in the future. And also the importance of your knives make a big difference on your cutting. The majority of major, large, and scary incidents come from a dull knife. And dull knife meaning is the duller the knife, the more pressure you need to put down onto an object. The harder you push, tend to fall and slip, and that is not good. Okay. Alrighty. So last step for our marinade here. Sorry, 2 more steps. I have a can of chipotle peppers. All right, so chipotle peppers are basically, not basically, they are jalapeno peppers that have been smoked and then placed in their can and then canned. And it comes in an adobo sauce. And that is basically just sort of the natural juices that come out of a smoked jalapeno. So that is a little fun tidbit there for the day. So I am going to open mine up. And you'll see in the can, if you push down on the can, you'll see sort of, there's kind of natural liquid and pulp and juices, right? So that's kind of what we want for the marinade. I'm going to scoop as much as I can out. So I've got about a good tablespoon there. And I'm just going to plop that in. And I will take one pepper out as well, so we can chop a pepper. Okay, and I'm just going to use my spoon here. Just hold it. If you want to wear gloves, you can, but it's just to keep your hands from getting dirty and gunked up here. So I've just got my spoon and I'm just going to press down. And again, we're just making decent sized cuts on our pepper. So we're cutting widthwise here. So you can see we've got them all diced up. And then we just want to run opposite on the width side. Okay. Again, this is a rough chop. This is a marinade. It doesn't need to be fine. It's all going to come off the steak at the end. So the chipotle, there's not a crazy amount of heat in chipotle. There is a little bit of heat, of course, because jalapenos can be quite hot and they can be quite mild. So it really depends on what the pepper is that is smoked. And the more you cook things, the less it takes away from the heat. So they are not crazy hot, but there definitely is a heat. And they provide an excellent smoky flavor to the dish. So it's a very good marinade. It adds a lot of flavor very quickly to the steak. Okay, so last step is I'm just going to take a tablespoon of oil. I'm using olive oil. Certainly use whatever you have on hand. Canola oil, sunflower seed oil, whatever you have in your house will do just fine. Olive oil is just the most generic oil in everyone's houses. So that is our marinade. Yes, that is correct. This is a great. How well do the chipotle peppers stay in the fridge? They stay fairly well. I mean, it is a canned product, so they do have a very good shelf life. You just have to be careful. You have to saran wrap the top really well, or you could vacuum seal them. That question, Darren, is question was how well did chipotle peppers stay in the fridge? They do stay well because I said it is a canned product, but it really depends on how well you seal them. An open can of chipotle peppers sealed properly in the fridge can probably last for up to 3 weeks, depending on your seal. Okay. All right, so that is our marinade. It's not pretty. It doesn't have to be pretty. Again, it is to marinate the steak, right? Okay, so I am just going to pour this into our steak mixture. It's my bag. For those who are wondering about salt, we will be seasoning. I have no idea what's going on because I'm new in this class. We'll try and catch you up to pace, but this is being recorded, I believe, Liz. And if you do want to go back on the video and see what you missed after the session, that will be available to you. We are fairly new into the session, so not much has happened. I missed the lime. That is okay if there's no lime in there. We do have acid in there with the vinegar, so they're both. The lime is more so flavor. We just need the acid in there to provide some sort of acidity, and that will actually help break down the proteins. Okay. So I've added my marinade in there. Do they come jarred? I haven't seen them jarred. I've only seen them in these small cans. That's just at the grocery stores near my house. So I haven't ventured away from my house too much to look for them, but I'm sure you can get them jarred. Okay, so I've sort of mixed my bag up, spread my marinade around as much as I can. So what this is going to do, it's going to tenderize the meat, and it's also going to add flavor. The acid, so the lime and the vinegar, are going to break down the proteins in the steak and make it more tender. The chipotle is going to add a nice, rich, deep, smoky flavor to the steak. And then the garlic is just adding a nice herbal, everyday flavor that we all know and love, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and leave this out. You can leave meat out at room temperature for up to 2.5 hours to be safe and legal by the FDA. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. Again, if you were to make this in the future, I would do this a day in advance. And that way you have the ultimate tenderized meat. Yeah, so Darren, so there's a few different ways you can do the Brussels sprouts. So for anyone else who's viewing that would like to go the veggie route, so the Brussels sprouts, if it was me in particular doing it, I would quarter them. Okay, so I would quarter them, peel the outside leaves, and then just apply the exact same marinade, and then you're going to do the exact same cooking method. Either if we're going to use a pan today in the oven, but you could also just put them in the oven, or you could put them in an air fryer, however you feel fit. And with the Brussels sprouts, you can sort of leave the marinade on while cooking them versus the steak. So I will go over that when we go to cooking, but I would use the same marinade and quarter them, or you can half them if you want a little chunkier, but quarter would go a little easier on 2 tacos. So, okay, so I'm just gonna wipe down my cutting board a little bit here and give it a quick wash to get that chipotle flavor off the cutting board. And if you did put the raw meat on the cutting board, make sure you give your cutting board a wash with soap, because we do not want to cross-contaminate. My meat did not touch my cutting board. It just went into the bag. So I just washed simply the chipotle off my cutting board so we can start our next process. Okay, so we're done with the chipotles. We are not done with the garlic or the lime, so we're going to keep those out as well. So, alrighty, so step 2, we're going to make some pickled onions. So pickled onions, if you ever had them made them before, they're very simple and easy to make, and they will last in your fridge for a very long time. And if you jar them, they will last you for an extremely long time. So we're not going to jar them today because we can use them fairly quickly, but we'll go over jarring as well. Okay, so got a little pot here. Got a pot, and then I've also got just a little side plastic bowl. So we're going to place the onions in here. If you have a mason jar, you can use that. Any type of instrument that can hold the onions. I'm just going to go ahead and have that to the side. Okay, so I'll get my onion out. So I've got one medium-sized red onion. Where did my measuring cups go? There they are. So in the pot, I'm going to add 1/2 cup of vinegar and 1/2 cup of water. So any pickling recipe, standard I should say, starts off with 1/2 and 1/2 vinegar and water. Whichever vinegar you'd like to use, you're more than welcome to use. Traditionally in a pickle vinegar, it would be normal distilled white vinegar, but we are using red wine, and I have a little rice wine vinegar for mine today. So we've got that on a pot. So again, with the pickling here, you can add so many different flavors. So you can add bay leaf, you can add herbs, you can add garlic, you can add peppercorns, you can add mustard seed. The list just goes on and on and on. That's where you can get creative to your own personal preferences of what you like in your pickles or your pickling liquids. So that just goes with you. So, so in the pot, I'm going to add 1/2 a tablespoon of just normal kosher or sea salt. And then I'm also going to add a full tablespoon of brown sugar or white sugar. So what the sugar is going to do is just going to balance out that tardy acidicness. So it's just going to make everything sort of smooth and run together. Salt, of course, is going to add just a little bit of flavor. So yeah, 1/2 vinegar, 1/2 cup vinegar and water, tablespoon of brown sugar or white sugar, and then a 1/2 tablespoon of salt. So I just place that on my stove, and I'm going to get that on right now. So I'm just going to turn that to about a medium high. For those of you who have number dials, I'm on a 7 right now, just for a quick reference. And we're just going to need to watch that as we chop our onions. And the reason we're doing this step right now is because pickling typically takes a little bit longer. Traditional pickling takes weeks, but there's no vinegar involved. That's just natural fermentation. But if you were to jar up, let's say some beans or some beets, typically take 1 to 2 weeks to do. Because we're doing this so quick, we're going to cut everything thin, and we want them to sort of pickle as long as we can, okay? So we're just going to go ahead and cut the root off here. We don't need the root or the end for these. Typically, if we were going for a fine dice of an onion, we would cut the root off, but we are not doing that today, so that is not needed. And then one more quick tip, I just have a bowl to the side here, and I usually just throw out like all my scraps or things that I've used, and I just put this in the bowl. So whenever I'm done with something, it just goes into the bowl. It declutters your kitchen. It also acts as a garbage can, and it just gives you more area to work as you're cooking. So it's always good to have a bowl to the side. If you don't have brown sugar, how much molasses? I would go about half a tablespoon of molasses. That question was just asking, if you don't have brown sugar, how much molasses would I use? And I would say half a tablespoon. So it is a little sweeter. So we've cut the onion in half. Okay. Straight down the middle. And then we're just taking off the skin. So if anyone's vinegar or water comes up to the boil, you can go ahead and turn that off as long as the the sugar and salt have dissolved in there. Oh, I have a really fresh onion and I'm struggling to get this outer layer off. Okay, great. Yes. And what I like to do also with the bowl trimmings, today I'm just sort of throwing everything in there, but when I'm cooking with a lot of vegetables, I throw my trimmings in there and then I put them in a Ziploc bag and freeze them. And once I get enough trimmings, you can sort of make your own vegetable stock. Just add all the vegetable trimmings into water, reduce the water down, and you have some homemade vegetable stock. Or you can add it into some chicken stock when you're making chicken noodle soup, etc. So, okay, so what we're doing now is we're going to thinly slice these onions as thin as possible. So you can see the onion is going this way, so we're going to slice that way, okay? So there's two ways. There's the half moon and then there's the shorter side. So we're going to want to cut with the onion, okay? So as thin as possible. You really take your time here. I'm trying to shave these to paper thin, okay? So really take your time here. So as you can see, get a piece out. I don't know how well the camera will show it, but I'm trying to go like razor thin. So almost see-through, okay? The reason we're doing that is because for pickling these in such a short period of time, and again, I'm just putting them in my container to the side, the thinner they are, the faster they will pickle, break down, and absorb the pickling flavor, okay? So as thin as possible, they don't have to be even. Nothing will ever be even with the knife, only with a mandolin. Be very careful here, okay? And once I reach sort of the halfway, I don't know if this has ever been proven or if it's a chefy thing, but usually when I reach halfway of an onion, I'm slicing this way, I always turn it to its side. I just find it easier to cut and go back. Okay. One. Now I've just sort of cut the ends off of mine. This is my personal preference. I just cut them off and put them to the side. Because when you cut the ends of an onion, it's hard to get, you sort of get these big clunks, which we don't want in these onions. Again, I would put these to the side and either cook them or put them into my my stock bag for future. I really just like to use the center of the onion because I find it gives you the best slices for pickling. Very consistent and thin. When you get down to the last little bit of the onion, just be careful because it does get a little slippery. It is okay to cry. It is very normal. If you wear contacts or glasses, I find them to be sort of a guard for onions. I used to wear contacts for forever, and I would never cry. And I thought I was like a, super onion chopper. And then I got eye surgery and I don't wear them anymore. And now I cry every time I cut an onion. So I know there's a million urban legends, run water, chew gum, this and that. Yeah, it is always okay to cry. I don't think any of them work, but that's just me. Okay, so I've got my onions chopped here. My pickling liquid has come to the boil. Everything is dissolved. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour that straight on top. And again, we want the vinegar to boil because we want it to be as hot as possible. Because that's just really going to kickstart the pickling process. The heat is going to wilt the onions, and then it's going to give the vinegar more time to sort of sink into that, into those onions. So if it doesn't cover all the way, don't worry about it. Just give it a quick push down. The heat will pickle them and they will break down. So just try and get them as flat as possible in the pickling liquid. And what I like to do, have something that will cover your pickling liquid. I'm just going to put a lid on top of it just to trap the heat in there. And that will keep the heat in there and again, speed up the process of the pickling, okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and place this to the side just next to my steak. Looks like everyone's doing a great job so far. And again, if I'm going too fast or I haven't explained something thoroughly and you're sort of pondering and wondering on it, please stop me and ask. It's always great to ask questions. That is how we learn. That's how I learn anyways. So I'm always open for questions. Okay, so again, I've got my bowl here and everything's to the side. I've got all my scraps and we're keeping our work area clean, right? So the importance of the bowl is very key. It is something that has helped me throughout the years of cooking, even at home in restaurants. It's very important to have some type of, not necessarily a bowl, but something you can place objects that you're no longer using in and just keep to the side. Just keeps away from clutter and distractions. All right. I'll give everyone just a few more seconds to just finalize this. So we're not doing it today, but it's something I am probably going to do later this evening, just because we already have pickled onions. But for those of you who bought jalapenos, these are just going to be going raw as just a little element of heat. But this is also, that's a great method for jalapenos too, is pickling jalapenos. It prolongs their shelf life. It adds a different flavor. It takes away some of the heat. It adds some nice sweetness, sweet and sour, and is a great condiment for tacos, any type of chicken or beef. But you can apply the exact same technique we just did with the vinegar, water, sugar, and apply it to this, okay? And that is a very basic pickling technique. And you can add so much more to it. When I make pickles, I add chilies, garlic, mustard seed, fresh dill. You can add anything you like, right? So, okay, so we have two more areas really to cover. That is our sauce and our guacamole. So we'll go ahead and do our guacamole here. So grab our ingredients for that. So I've got 2 avocados, got a little bit of lime that we used earlier, got some garlic, cilantro, and of course, salt and pepper. Okay. There are optional ingredients. You can add cayenne pepper, paprika. Some people like to add tomatoes into theirs. I didn't think it was necessary for this dish, so we're not doing tomatoes today. We're just going to do this version of a guacamole. So if you have not made guacamole before, We'll make it today and you'll see how very easy it is to make. Okay, we're gonna start out with our avocados. Just going to grab another spoon here. So I've just grabbed just a normal spoon and a fork, and we'll get to those when needed. And then I've got a bowl that we're going to make the guacamole in. Okay. So for this, we need to take the insides out. So with a knife carefully, we're just going to press in, and you're going to hit the center, the core. Then very carefully, we're going to rotate, extremely carefully, rotate our knife in full motion. The knife will stay along the core. If you don't feel comfortable doing it in your hands, you certainly can do it on the board. So start with a half, you flip it over, insert your knife again, and then cut over as you see fit, okay? And then you just, it is a tough window. So Darren asks, how do you time your avocado? There's a lot of factors that go into that. Obviously the seasons have a huge impact. The warmer it is, the faster they ripen. Sunlight, there's many different aspects. So I usually try and buy mine 2 days in advance of using them. And then I place them in a very sunny area. And then that way, when I go to use them, they're very tender. And it really depends on what you're looking for, right? So that's a very loaded question. There's a lot of variables, but for me, 2 days in sunlight, but it takes planning, right? So, so with the core, just the avocado on the board, just gonna slam it in there. So again, knife just into the core, and then I just put my hand on the bottom, and it's just a slight twist, and the core comes out. Okay. I've put in unripe avocado in paper bag with some apple to overnight. That seems to help. Gas is released. Yeah, so it seems we have a few different I guess techniques here. So Lisa says she puts an unripe avocado in paper bag with apple or two overnight. Says it releases gases and the releases gases from the apple as they age. I have never personally done that, but it's definitely something to try. And then Liv says she keeps them in the fridge, taking one out every day, so there's always one ready for me. That is a good idea too. So if you're an avid avocado lover, keeping them in the fridge so they don't break down as fast, and then take them out as you want to use them, that is a great idea as well. So certainly some good feedback in the comments there. My core is giving me a little trouble here. There we go. Okay, so it is good that we do have some people who have worked with avocado before. So once we have our avocado cut in half and decored for me. So for me, there's lots of different techniques you can use here. Some people like to go in with the front of the spoon. I go in with the back of the spoon to start, and I just sort of run along the edge. So you're just kind of holding it in the hand, and I just run along the edge. Okay. And then I go in under, and then I take my spoon, go straight underneath, just sort of work it around and give it a little twist. Okay, and voila. There are various machines. Yeah, that's the one resolution to using up avocados is just make guacamole. Just have a bunch of chips, and then there's your meals for the day. Okay, so again, my avocado's not the greatest. It's not perfect, but we work with what we have. I just go in with the edge of the spoon, just around the sides. And then I like to take my full spoon, go in, and just sort of work it with my hands. And you can sort of feel the avocado detach from the skin. Like I said, if you really don't like doing this, there are gadgets that will do this for you. I don't think they're that expensive. I think they're only about 10 bucks. So if you like avocados and you like to eat them a lot or make guacamole, it's certainly an investment to look into. This one's not the greatest. I cut this off. Yes, that is the challenge. So my avocados aren't quite soft enough yet, so they do sort of stick to the skin. And you can just see it in the color too. The greener towards the outside, you can just tell where they're going to be a little more firm. And that is the case with mine, but that is okay. Okay, just going to give my hands a quick wash. Okay. So now I'm just going to add these to my bowl here. Again, this is a very sort of basic guacamole recipe. I always tell clients, friends, peers, I never tend to follow a full recipe in full depth for cooking anyways, because I find cooking to be about personal tastes and preferences versus as baking, it's a science. You have to follow the recipes for baking. I like to cook when I see something I've never cooked. I find a good recipe, I see how it's prepared, and I adjust to my taste and my preferences. So just because something tells you this or I tell you this, don't ever feel you have to follow it to a T. Cook to what you like and what your style is. If you like more garlic, add more garlic. If you want more salt, add more salt, etc. So again, everything we're doing today is sort of in its first form. And then once you understand how it's done, you can go ahead and add your flavors and taste to it, okay? So before we start adding the avocado, I'm gonna take the leftover lime that we have. I'm just gonna cut it in half. I'm gonna use the basically 3/4 of a lime. I'm gonna add 1/2 of that into the avocado to start. And the reason I'm doing that, let me add a bit of salt too. The reason I'm adding the lime to start is because the acid is going to help break down the avocado. It's going to give you less of a fuss. Bye, Darren. Hope you have a great day. It's going to give the avocados, it's going to make the avocados break down a little easier because there is some acid in there. So, especially if they're a little firmer like mine are, it really just helps you break down the avocados a little easier. So there's nothing pretty to this. This just takes some muscle, some time, and really just mashing these down. And once you break a big piece down into sections, I can really pick on that piece and sort of smush it into a corner and then move to the next one. And you will really discover quickly how ripe or unripe your avocados are by doing this. But with strength, you can always break anything down. So larger spoon. Up. So this is part of the mise en place. I want yourself to envision you're cooking the steak right now and you need avocado. So you need guacamole. Having to do this while you're cooking something else, it wouldn't be fun. When you overcook things, you burn yourself, you cut yourself, you're trying to rush and you're trying to do multiple things at once, okay? The beauty of all this is all of this stuff can be done in advance or days in advance. The guacamole, maybe not so much, maybe a day max in advance, but everything else can be done well in advance. You go to work, you go to class, maybe it might be during the day, you can come home, everything is done in advance. And then all you really have to do is cook the steak and assemble. That is the beauty of mise en place, or in better terms, just prep. Prep. Exactly. You don't have to do all of this at once. Liv just said you can do this piece by piece ahead of time. So you can go ahead and pickle your onions at one point, and go ahead and do something else. Come back, make your guacamole. make your sauce, marinate your steak. Doesn't all have to be at once. Purpose of today, cooking wise, it does have to be at once because we are teaching and we are learning. But I really hope everyone takes away from this that all these things can be done ahead of time, okay? So I know people might be mashing still or working away. There might be assistants in the room as well. So we'll just go ahead and start. Our next ingredient was this some garlic. Again, I only have 2 avocados. All right. I'm just going to use 1 clove of garlic. As I stated before, if you like garlic and you want more garlic or you have more avocados, go ahead and add more garlic. This is tailored to your personal preference. We're going to use the same technique as we used before. I'm just going to cut lengthwise, and then we're going to turn the cut widthwise, and then we'll cut a little finer just because we don't want huge chunks of garlic in the avocado. If you have a grater, you certainly can grate the garlic. Makes it a little easier. So I'm just rough chopping this garlic here. Just basically running my blade over and over through the pile of garlic until it's thin enough where I would enjoy it and not get a huge clump of garlic. For me personally, I don't like biting into big chunks of raw garlic. Some people do. If you do that, a big chunks of raw garlic. Okay. Okay. So mine is down to a place where I'm satisfied. I'll just show one other quick technique with garlic. If you need a super fine paste and you don't have a grater, when you have chopped the garlic down to a decent size, I'm just adding salt on top of here, okay? And then when you add the salt, you're basically going to rub your knife back and forth on the garlic, okay? So what the salt does, it draws the moisture out of the garlic and breaks down all the protein in the garlic. I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but it looks like it's disappearing, okay? So what the salt and the pressure is doing is it's making a paste. It's basically grinding the garlic down so fine that it becomes a paste. So there's no actually texture to the garlic anymore. So this is a good little trick for sauces. So you probably can't even see it on the screen, but it's completely a paste now. Like there's no pieces anymore. It's a paste, so it's very fine. Okay, so that is one cool technique to use if you want very fine garlic. Chop it down as fine as you can, add salt, and then again, you're just sort of rubbing and putting pressure on the garlic on the board, okay? We've got the garlic in there. Okay, let's go ahead and add some cilantro. So cilantro, one of those things you love or hate. To me, I hate it, so I'm not going to add a ton. If you like more cilantro, add a bunch more cilantro. But for me, it is not my favorite. I'm still probably going to add the normal amount I would add to a guacamole if I was serving it, which is about four full stems of guacamole. Sorry, cilantro. With the cilantro here, a few different ways you can do it. You do need to be careful with cilantro because it can be quite dirty. It's one of the herbs I find to be pretty dirty in stores. So coriander, yeah, it does taste like soap. I agree. It's very soapy for me. That's sort of one of the things you hear if you don't like cilantro. It tastes like soap. Cilantro, otherwise known as coriander. I believe coriander is the state that the cilantro grows. It's the seed, which sprouts into the cilantro herb. So yeah, if you hear coriander, think cilantro. So again, there's a few techniques you can do here. You can sort of just rough chop your blade through. If you were to have more cilantro, what we do in kitchens is if we have a lot of herbs, we gently bunch them up, sort of roll them like you're rolling some tobacco, and you roll them into a little ball and you hold it in your hand, and then you just rock the cradle through, slowly pulling your hand back. Okay, and throw out the end stems. And now I'm just going to run my knife through 4 or 5 times. We don't really want to run a knife through here a whole lot because the more you run your knife through, It's what we call bruising. So the herbs are going to bruise. And that just means that their natural oils are going to spill out of them onto the cutting board, okay? Okay, so we've got garlic, cilantro or coriander, some lime, some salt in here, okay? If you wanted to add some heat, you certainly can. Cayenne is a normal heat factor, or any type of chilies you have are a traditional heat factor in the kitchen. So I'm probably gonna add, just for this, 1/4 a teaspoon. And that would be the same goes as paprika or cumin. And I'm just gonna give this a mix here and add some pepper. Mix around. Okay, so you have your base of your guacamole. Now it's very, very important that we taste. Tasting is crucial in cooking. How do you know what you are making if you don't know what it tastes like? Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and taste. So for me, that's pretty well balanced. Good amount of heat. Straightforward avocado. I get the cilantro flavor and a nice little background hint of garlic. I'm going to add a little bit more lime just because I like my sauces or condiments to be very acidic. I find it activates more of my mouth. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a bit more lime. I'm going to give that a mix round. We are good to go. This would also be another area of preference for if you like your avocado very, very fine or a little chunkier. That is where you would adjust to your preferences, okay? So that is done. I'm going to go ahead and put that to the side. We do need our lime still, so we will need lime. We just have one more component to complete and then a few extras. Yeah, avocado certainly is great. It's a nice treat. I really enjoy making guacamole in the summertime. To me, it just spells summertime. It's great to do with your friends or family, especially on the weekends, kind of hang out, socialize, have some drinks. Go to someone's house and they make homemade guacamole, is always a hit. So for those of you who have not made it, you see how simple it is. And you know, other optional things that you can throw in there, like I stated before, diced tomato. You can throw some chilies if you have some chilies in there. You can throw some other herbs in there if you'd like. Is really up to you. So I'm just giving my cutting board a quick wash. You don't really have much else to do. In fact, there's only one other main component we need to use on this cutting board, which is our sauce. But for those of you who bought the red cabbage jalapenos, we will go over that as well. Okay. Always good to have a sort of a kitchen towel around too, just to help clean and wipe the areas. And if you want to feel really chefy, you can sort of throw it in your, if you have an apron on, you can throw an apron, throw it over your shoulder. That's sort of the stereotypical chef look, right? As you see on TV. So, all right. So last component, or last mandatory component, I should say, is our sauce. It's very straightforward. It is chipotle, mayonnaise, and lime. And that's it. And when I say those ingredients, you need to salt and pepper everything you cook. So it's always a rule of thumb. Cook in layers. Every layer of the dish needs to be seasoned because you will taste each layer of each dish. And if it is not seasoned, you will be able to tell. I know a lot of people say I'm not adding salt because this component is salty. If that's what you want to do, you can do that. But I am a firm believer that you need to season every aspect of your dish, because if you season things correctly, you will taste them. It will enhance the flavor of each dish. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and start our sauce. We have no questions, so I'm assuming everyone is keeping up, or maybe even standing around waiting. It is possible. So I'm going to go ahead and I just have a kitchen tablespoon. So I'm going to take 2 heaping spoons of mayonnaise, okay? And again, this is just for 2 to 4 people. If you want to add more, you can add more, okay? And if you actually want to measure this out, that's probably about 4 actual tablespoons. Okay, so we're going to go back to our chipotles. I'm just going to go ahead and get this sauce on the side. So I'm going to dig in. You see it, you're getting a lot of sauce on the side, okay? So for me, I've got about pretty neutral, just amount of the adobo sauce from the side of the can. I'm just going to add 1 tablespoon, okay? Again, that is not a heaping. That is a pretty leveled kitchen tablespoon. I'm going to add that in. I'm going to add 1/4 of lime juice. Squeeze that right in there. And of course, salt and pepper. Give that a mix. Okay. And would you look at that? Does that not look like sauce that you get in restaurants? Is that not a fancy aioli that you get in a restaurant? Is that not something that you get charged a lot of money to eat in a restaurant? It is extremely simple. So whenever you hear an aioli, it's just a fancy word for flavored mayonnaise. So whenever you put something in mayonnaise, which is obviously going to taste better, whatever you put in it. But if you get a spicy aioli or chipotle aioli at a restaurant, there is probably about a 95% chance that this is what it is, okay? Just so you are aware. You certainly can make your own mayonnaise. A lot of restaurants don't make their own mayonnaise for 2 reasons. It is time consuming. It is, I guess, 3 reasons. It's time consuming, it is expensive, and it limits the amount of customers that can eat it. Okay, raw egg. It's a big thing for a lot of people. If you're pregnant, you can't eat raw egg. Allergies to egg. Made with Hellmann's mayonnaise, there's, I believe, no egg ingredients or no raw egg in it. So that is that. So, okay, so we definitely need to go ahead and give this a taste. It should be smoky, should be acidic, should be salty. Okay, if you find it tastes too much like mayonnaise, you can either do a few things. You can add more lime, which I'm going to do. Just a bit more for me. Or you can add more chipotle. And if you want to, you could add garlic to this. Add other herbs to this. You could add cilantro to this. A lot of times when I do private dinner parties, I do make my own mayonnaise when I do that, but I will make a chipotle cilantro lime aioli. So I just add chopped cilantro in there. That is that. That is how you make a restaurant style sauce. And again, this will keep in the fridge for a very long time. It is a processed mayonnaise, so they are meant to last a long time. Okay, so you can make a large quantity of this, keep it in your fridge, and this will be great on a lot of things, you know, like flatbreads, pizzas, sandwiches, eggs, anything really. Anything that mayonnaise goes on and you like chipotle, you can put that on. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so that is done. And there, so we are done all of our main components to the dish. All right. So what time is it? It's 4 o'clock for me. It is 1 o'clock for you. So that took an hour to do. And that is with me explaining everything, people doing it for the first time, introductions. That only took an hour. There you go. Yeah, you just made Chipotle Southwest sauce, right? So, yeah, I hope that's a valuable lesson on sauces, and to not get fooled into fancy sauces at restaurants. So yeah, all that prep took about an hour of work, and that easily can be done in far significantly less time. Again, there's a lot of talking, introducing, explaining, etc. So that just goes to show you can make sort of elevated tacos fairly quickly. Okay. We also went over a few different cooking techniques as well as knife skills. All right. So that is that. So before we go ahead and start cooking, now basically all we have to do is cook our steak. I don't know if anyone actually got red cabbage or jalapenos. If they did, I'm going to show you. It's pretty straightforward. We're just chopping it up. So I'll just go ahead and show you. So red cabbage, I must explain. So basically we're just going to cut with the core. And what I mean by with the core, we're just going to cut through the core, this being the core. So it'll stay intact a little more firmly. It is a lot firmer than an onion, so it doesn't make too much of a difference, but it's just sort of ingrained in my body to do so. So I only need half. So again, this is another, excuse me, this is another fancy restaurant thing when you get on your tacos. So again, all we're doing is we're just chopping this as fine as we can. So if you have a mandolin, you can do this, but in a restaurant, so I'm just gonna, that's what I call squaring. So we don't have the round edge, it's just called squaring an object. So everything's gonna be uniform. Basically, all I'm doing is just sort of thinly, as thin as possible, almost shaving it. All right. So when you go to restaurants, and you see all this purple cabbage and it's so fine and thin, that's all it is. And sometimes they'll just throw some vinegar and some salt on it. And this is usually what you get on top of your tacos. It doesn't taste like much, but it adds a crunch, right? You wanted to make it even more fine, what you could do is certainly cut it into a smaller section. I'm just going to cut this quarter in half. The side, and then you have less, and then you can really just focus on chopping even thinner. And this way will give you more of a strip like cabbage. Okay. And there we basically just have like an easy topping for our tacos. Okay. And if you have any large clumps, you can go ahead and just move those to the side. But yeah, so if you add some vinegar to this, just a little bit of vinegar and water, it will sort of loosen it up and make it look a little bit more presentable. Okay, I'm just going to put that to the side on my cutting board. And then again, with the jalapeno, there's not really much to explain here. It's just we're just going to basically slice our jalapeno as thin as possible. And then this is just the topping if you want more heat on your taco, just so we have that. Okay. It's very important to wash your hands after cutting hot peppers. There are many ways to burn yourself after the fact. Okay, and that's that. And then if you have cheese, obviously we just throw the cheese on the tacos. So yeah, we've got everything done. Everything's ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to pull it all out. So we have our guacamole that we made. We have our sauce. We have our pickled onions. You can go ahead and look at now, even if you feel them, they're very soft. They've broken down. They should be cool enough now to touch. So you can touch them, they're soft. Okay. The longer they sit in there, the softer they'll become and the more flavorful they'll become. Okay. And we've got our steak. So just zoom out here. We take a look. So we've got everything we need right here, right? Got our steak, got some lime for garnish. We've got our chopped veg, we've got our guacamole, we've got our sauce, we've got our pickled onions. All good to go, right? The guac, only thing that wouldn't last. Yes, guac would not last well. For me personally, I only like to use guac in the fridge for like a day. It just browns very quickly. Best way to keep guacamole is with an airtight lid. And then I also put saran wrap over. I've flattened it out as much as I can put saran wrap over top of the guac and then put an airtight lid on there. Because what happens when it turns brown, that's just oxidization. There we go, we can say it. It's just browning of the guacamole, just the air gets in there and it turns it brown. Still tastes fine, but it's not appealing. So don't have to worry about that too much. So, okay, so let's move on to our steak here. I'm gonna turn my oven on to 375 degrees and just start that warming up. And in the meantime, what we can do is we can just move all of our stuff to the side here.
We got a question there, Eamon, just about the beans.
Oh, yes. No, for the beans, you don't need to. Basically, for the beans, you would apply the same technique to the beans as you're basically gonna warm them up in a pan. You don't need them for the oven, unless they're raw beans, like actual raw beans that need to be fully processed. But that would take soaking and cooking. Just canned beans that would have been sort of strained and then added to the marinade. No, you do not need to worry about the oven. It simply would just be cooking in the pan. And then it's the same thing for Darren, if he does come back and watch this. With the Brussels sprouts, you're going to follow the same cooking technique. You can roast them in the pan to your liking. If they like them a little crunchy, if you want them a little softer, you can throw them in the oven and finish them in the oven, or you can just add some water or some vegetable stock to the pan, and that will just sort of steam them and loosen them up a little bit. Or if you have an air fryer, go ahead and just throw them in the air fryer until they're kind of sort of crispy and ready to go. So yeah, I have my tacos out. I really enjoy, again, this is just my preference. I really enjoy corn tortillas that are very small. I don't know if that was like, this is my hand, like it's pretty small. It's a small, probably like 4x3, 3x3. The reason for that is I just like to be able to eat more. So the smaller the taco, the less you get filled. And it's sort of like tapas style. You eat them pretty quickly and you're not sort of battling over a large taco. So, but again, that's all personal preference. Okay, so my oven is preheating. I'm gonna go ahead now, take my steak. Didn't forget about the steak. So I'm just gonna grab a plate to put the steak on. And we're just gonna give it a little pat down. We will need a cutting board at the end at the steak, okay? So try and get as much marinade left in the bag as you can. We're going to pat this down. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw my marinade out. Okay. So we're just basically trying to get all the little bits of chipotle and garlic off there because they will burn. It's not as necessary with the vegetables because you can move the vegetables a lot around in the pan. With the steak or any type of animal protein, it's going to be sitting in the same spot for a long period of time, which will certainly add room for burning of the garlic and chipotle. Okay, so you should be able to smell it. It should smell basically like lime, chipotle, and garlic, which is good. Okay, give that a pat down. Just give my hands a quick wash because we just did touch, not directly, maybe indirectly, raw beef. No, we are still working with it, but we're just going to wash our hands so we can season. Okay, so I've just patted that down. I'm going to season pretty liberally both sides with salt and pepper. Seasoning is extremely important. Question that I get a lot is people say, oh, you're adding a lot of salt, or you're adding a lot of pepper. It may seem that way. This just comes with learning and understanding. When you have such a large piece of protein, you know, you need to be able to add enough seasoning so that when you get into the middle of the protein, it still carries through, right? Also, when you cook, a lot of the salt and pepper rubs off on the steak. So it's really just time and understanding of sort of what salt level is acceptable, etc. Okay. So if you are an everyday home cook, you enjoy cooking, but you don't cook a lot, and you're still learning, I always tell whoever I'm teaching, when you think you've added enough salt, double it. And that is sort of a restaurant kind of understanding of how salt works. The reason you like to go out and eat are the reasons we're trying to teach, right? The reasons at home your food doesn't taste as good as you don't season enough. You don't understand the techniques, which we're teaching today. Just little things, right? It's just learning. Obviously, a lot of butter, a lot of cream, you know, wine and cooking, and a lot of seasoning. That really what it comes down to. And of course, at good restaurants, you know, a lot of them tend to find the best produce or the best proteins that they can find, which does influence that. Versus, you know, just a generic grocery store steak, you know, they're finding the best of the best from butchers. So, but they're the small things, right? So, okay, so I'm just gonna grab another cutting board here. So I'm just gonna grab another cutting board from my steak. If you want to go ahead and wash yours, you can go ahead and do so. I've just got a few things on there. It's just easier for me to do at the moment. Okay, so my oven is almost there. I'll just give it a few more minutes and then we'll start. Yeah, so when you are cooking at home, cooking something that maybe is not the most expensive, try that. Add a little bit more salt, taste something, add a bit more salt and see if it improves it, okay? Salt is not meant to make things taste salty. That is not the intent of what salt is. The reason salt and pepper are should be on everything, even when you make salads, it's important to add salt and pepper. The reason behind salt and pepper is it activates two important parts of your palate. The salt activates the front of your tongue and the pepper activates the back. Okay, so the whole point of that is to sort of activate your entire mouth. So it gets every taste bud working, okay? And then you have sour on the sides and sweet sort of on the top. So those are the four umami taste buds in your mouth. Salt and pepper are supposed to get sort of the whole thing. And that is why we add salt and pepper to everything. So as you're eating, whatever you're eating, if it has salt and pepper on it, it wakes up your entire palate and it gives you the full taste of whatever is in your mouth. Okay, so that is the whole point behind salt and pepper, not to make it salty and not to make it taste like pepper. And it still should taste like that, but the intent is to work your whole palate. So you're getting the full enjoyment of whatever is you're cooking or eating. Yes. Yes, so Liv said she adds salt to her cacao, makes a little more sweet, tastes better. And that just reiterates my point. It won't dominate from what you're eating, just elevates the flavor by enhancing those taste buds, right? So in theory, you add salt to everything. I actually know I have a friend who puts salt in his beer. It seems crazy, but he does it and he swears it tastes better. I personally never done it, but based on that theory, it would work. So yeah, salt and pepper to a lot of things you're cooking. Doesn't have to be a lot, but just a little bit, especially for the sweet parts. Okay, so we're about to start cooking. Just to reiterate, we have everything in place here, okay? So we've got our steak, which we're going, sorry, I'm holding a camera right now, it's hard to do. We've got our steak good to go. I've got my extra veg here, just for toppings. Got my guacamole, my pickled onions, my sauce, and a little bit of lime if you want to squeeze in at the end. And we've got our tortillas, okay? I'm just gonna throw my tortillas when our steak is resting in the oven for 15 to 20 seconds. Just makes them more pliable. Camera down. Just makes them more pliable and softer. And it's just easier to work with. Bear with me, I'm going to have to move my computer. All righty, so we've got two more techniques and then we are done. So this technique is searing. Majority should have seared or know what searing is. It is just the crusting or searing of a protein. And in scientific terms, it is meaning caramelization of sugars in the proteins. So why everyone likes grilled protein, grilled fish, grilled steak is because it is caramelized. Caramelized meaning it is cooking the natural sugars in the protein and enhancing the flavor. So whenever you have something that is salty, the more cooked or more broken down, per se, an object is, the more intense it gets. So think of 100 little people in this pan. You have 100 people, not on fire, just this is a pan. That was a bad term. So this is a place, people are in here, okay? You have 100 people. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller. All the 100 people stay, but the area gets smaller. They all have to stay within that. It's intensifying, okay? Just making everything more intense. So think of that term, maybe not people in a pan, but just think of objects in a space closing in on each other. They're intensifying. So that's what we do when we cook or caramelize things or reduce sauces. It's just taking all the actual natural flavor in there and just intensifying them, reducing them down, okay? So that is the caramelization of the protein. So we get those brown bits, which is the sugars caramelizing and cooking. And that's what we want. So I'm just going to go ahead and add probably about a tablespoon of oil into my pan. Okay. Keep in mind, everyone's stoves and everyone's pans are different. Okay. I have a stainless steel, pretty thick bottom pan. So this pan retains heat quite well. And I have a ceramic stovetop. Some people might have nonstick. They might have gas. Everything cooks differently. So again, if you ever find yourself in another cooking class or following a recipe, what they say might not be what you get, okay? So keep that in mind. So the intent cook on this steak is medium rare. That is the intent way to eat a flank steak. If you like it a little more cooked, by all means, cook it longer. If you like it a little less cooked, cook it less, okay? So my oven is now at 375. Oil is in my pan. I'm going to turn my pan on to a 7, okay? Medium high if you do not have a temperature gauge. A good little item to have in your home if you do use oil a lot is a screen protector. Just sits on top here, prevents oil from splattering out all over your stovetop. Okay, these are about 15 bucks. Again, they sit on top of your pan and you'll have no oil splatter around. Okay. You do have a fan on your stove. I would suggest turning it on. So it will get a little smoky. And that is part of cooking. And, so one way to tell if your oil is hot, obviously if it's smoking, it's hot, but just how the oil moves around in the pan. The faster it moves, the hotter, the slower it moves, the colder, okay? So my oil probably needs about another 20 seconds. And then I'm gonna aim for about 3 minutes aside. And then I'm just gonna put my steak in the oven for about 2 minutes. And we should be at a good medium rare. Yeah, so my steak is about an inch thick, just for reference. So once I get my steak in the pan, I'm gonna turn my microphone off just so you don't hear sizzling the whole time. If you have any questions, I will be monitoring and I will come back on when I'm ready to speak again about what we're doing. So again, I have tongs here. You want to use your hands, you can use your hands, but I am going to lay the meat in and away from me, okay? Never towards you, away from you. You hear that sizzle is what you want to hear. Okay. I've got my steak in. Got a good sizzle. Gonna let that go for 3 minutes. And we'll come back and flip to the other side. So I will mute for 3 minutes and then come back. Okay, so it's time to flip. We got a nice little crust on our steak. If you see the bottom of your pan getting dark, it is normal because we were cooking with sugar and garlic. So it'll be a little darker than normal. For reference, you can see mine. Got a few brown spots, and that is totally normal from sugar. So do not worry about that. So we've got a good crust on our steak. We go ahead and put it back on. We're just going to leave that for another 3 minutes. I'm going to step away so you don't hear these sizzle. I did type it in the chat, but just in case anyone was wondering or didn't see it. Preheat for beans. No, beans can be cooked in a pan just till they're warm. Brussels sprouts will be cooked the exact same way in a pan, just with the oil in a hot pan until they are caramelized and cooked to your preference. If you find they're still too hard and are burning more so than they're cooking, you can add water or vegetable stock to go ahead and steam them and then cook them through, or cook them directly in an oven or air fryer till cooked to your preference. You can cook the steak for 2 minutes aside. I'm cooking for 3 based on my heat. If you were cooking on a hotter temperature, you could cook for 2 minutes aside, just as long as you're getting that nice sear and caramelization that you're looking for. Okay. Okay, so we're all caught up. So the hotter your stove is, the more smoke you're going to get in your kitchen. The reason I chose medium to medium high heat just prevents a lot of smoke in your kitchen. My oven is handling it just fine. If this was to be in a restaurant or I was cooking for clients, I would have the heat on max heat just to get a very intense crust. But because it is home cooking, there's a little bit more leeway. We don't really need to get that super hard caramelized crust. Okay. Yes, Liv, that is a good question. Liv just asked if we did Brussels sprouts and wanted to add some water or stock to the pan, would it just be a very shallow amount of steam rather than boil? Yes, that is correct. You're basically trying to cover the bottom of your pan, just so the bottom is covered. When you do add the water or stock, it is going to reduce very quickly initially, just because the pan is so hot. You're just basically going to add a little bit more, and you have to keep an eye on it until it is cooked to your preference. Okay. But with this marinade for the Brussels sprouts or beans or chickpeas, you don't really need to rub them off like we did the steak, because you can move them around a lot in the pan. And if you're going to add water, it's not going to burn. It'll actually deglaze the pan and get the fond, which is called off the bottom. And just it would actually sort of increase the flavor in that sense. So do not worry about taking the marinade off. Okay. So my pan is oven proof, so I'm just going to go ahead and add my pan directly in the oven. If not, baking sheet, throw on a baking sheet and add it in. Okay. My steak looks good, and I'm just going to go in the oven for about 2 to 3 minutes. Okay. And what the oven is doing, the oven is just going to make sure that the inside of the steak reaches up to temperature, as the searing only really allows the sort of outsides of the steak. Yes, make sure you don't have plastic on your handles. That is a good point. If you have plastic handles, that would not be oven safe, so please do not put that in the oven. Transfer that to a baking sheet or a pan that does not have plastic handles and is oven safe. You definitely want to be cautious of that. It happens to all of us, so just please be aware of that. So yes, caramelizing steak on the outside is cooking from the top down. Yeah, the oven, it cooks from the inside up. So the heat is circulated in the oven, so the heat penetrates and cooks throughout and up. Okay, so you just have to think of all that moisture in the protein. It's getting warm. The moisture is trying to escape, so it is cooking throughout the entire steak. Okay, so that's why we finished in the oven. If it was a thinner steak, you could just pan sear it, because mine is a little thicker. Nicholas, how long in the oven? I'm going to about 2 to 3 minutes. So I'll probably take mine out at 2, just for a medium rare. If you want yours cooked a little bit longer, or don't feel that it's going to be cooked long enough for 2, feel free to leave it a little longer. But about, for me, 2.5 minutes in the oven, just to get it cooked through. Again, this is the tricky part with teaching online and not in person. Everyone's going to have different sizes of steak, so it is difficult to gauge. If you do have a meat thermometer, that is the best scenario, or any type of digital, doesn't have to be a meat thermometer. If you have a digital thermometer, that is great. So the target temperature we are looking for is anywhere between 130 degrees Fahrenheit to 135. Okay. So that is right around medium rare. And you also have to factor in rest time. When the steak sits, it is still hot, it is still cooking, it is still rising in temperature. Okay. So yeah, it's really difficult to answer how long, because everyone's steak is going to be thicker or thinner or smaller. The best way to know a steak, other than persistency and just repetition, is have a digital meat thermometer. And that way you can definitely make sure that you're getting the exact temperatures that you're looking for. Okay, so mine is good to come out. Again, if you are using a pan, make sure you have a kitchen rag or a tea towel, because the handle will be extremely hot. I have done it myself. I have touched a hot pan. It's not a good time. So I recommend that you do not do that. Have a tea towel or a rag or oven mitts to take out your pan. Okay. All righty. So I'm now going to take my steak and we are going to let that rest. Okay, so what we want to do now is we definitely want to make sure that this steak rests. So this is the most basic of ways, is just having it on a cutting board. We'll show you a few other ways. Another way you could do is some people like to wrap theirs in foil to keep it hot. I tend to not worry about that because it's not going to rest for over 5 minutes. If you're resting this for up to 10, 15 minutes, perhaps. Only thing with foil is it keeps moisture on the top of the steak and it'll sort of diminish the crust that we gained, which I'm not a fan of. That is more for larger cuts of meat. So second way, this is a very chefy way of doing things. So I just have, this is just basically a wire rack, a cookie sheet, whatever you want to call it. Place that on top of that. The reason I have it on top of this, on top of the cutting board, is you have full air circulation, okay? So the bottom of the steak, again, moisture. If there's moisture that's trapped into there, it's going to take away from that sear. And it's going to take away from that crispy bit that we just worked so hard to get. So if we have this cookie sheet, just giving us air rotation through, and it's allowing the bottom of the steak to rest evenly as long as the top of the steak, okay? So I've turned my oven off. My oven is still very hot. It will remain hot. So when we are ready to just about to slice the steak, I'm just going to pop my tortillas into the oven just for 15 to 30 seconds. Again, that's just going to warm them up. That's just going to bring them back to life a little bit. And it's just going to make them more pliable. Depending on what you have, if you have flour tortillas, they're usually fairly loose. But if you have corn tortillas, they tend to be a little bit more stiff when they're cold. So it is good to heat them up. You can even just throw them in the microwave for 15 seconds. I like to do them in the oven. And if you have gone to any sort of Mexican style restaurant, you might notice that they have grill marks on them. Some of them grill them. It's just adding heat and flavor as well as some flair. So yeah, so our steak's rested. Now basically comes the assembly time and everything's ready to go, right? So that is the point of mise en place. Now when we cut our steak, we can eat, everything's ready. Everything's good to go. So we don't have to worry about any last minute fix-ups or whatnot. We all have it good to go. So I hope I've embedded the word mise en place into your brain, and I hope you carry that with you through the rest of your cooking. It is very helpful. It may seem sort of redundant and silly the first few times, but you will find, especially if you have recipes that you make over and over again, if you do mise en place, you will really realize how useful it is and how less stressful it is, how more organized you are. And with those two things combined, you just come down with a better product in cooking. So mise en place is one of the most important things in cooking. So if you're going to take away one thing from today, mise en place. Again, everything in its place in French terms. Okay. Steak just needs a few more minutes. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead. Yes, that's a good point. So much stress is taken away, and if you fail to prepare, you're prepared to fail. That's a good point. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop my tortilla in the oven. I would suggest throwing it on a baking sheet or something you can remove. It's a little easier. Do not do what I just did and throw it in the rack. I am experienced with taking things out of the oven with nothing on them. So make sure you put them in on something that can be removed as a whole object. Okay. So another thing with resting is you can always see the amount of juice that comes out from it, right? So that is basically inside the protein, it's hot, and the liquids are trying to find somewhere to go, right? So they're trying to escape because it's hot, they're moving. Just think about when you go into a warm bath, you jump, right? Your body aches up, your blood starts to go, everything's moving around. So that's what's happening in this. It's shocked, everything's moving around. So if you were to cut into that right now, what you see on your cutting board would triple, right? So those liquids inside haven't had a chance to cool down and really sort of figure out what's going on, and they need time to do so. Okay, so I've got my tortilla out. Steak needs about 30 more seconds. And then I will just show you how I would plate this in a restaurant. Again, this is just for at home and for yourself, but if you're ever to cook this for someone, friends, family, you want to jazz it up a little bit, I will just show you. Again, it's a taco. It's very hard to make it glorified and I guess fancy, but we'll do our best so that doesn't look like just your average taco. Okay, so all right, so last technique here is slicing. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and remove this juice for now. This liquid serves no purpose to us at this moment. If you're going to make a steak sauce, or if you had a poultry and you want to make gravy, that liquid is very important to keep, and you can add it to your sauces. But for today, it is not needed. Okay. So with slicing, I'm sure a few of you have heard of slicing against the grain, or with the grain, whichever you're slicing. And it's very, very important, especially when it comes to flank steak. Flank steak is a steak that is meant to be marinated, cooked quickly, and cut against the grain. So what I mean by that is if you look down on your steak, you'll see lines throughout the steak. So you probably even see it on the camera. If I pull it back a bit, you can see how the lines are running down. Okay, so that is the grain. Okay, so if we were to cut to the grain this way, all our pieces, you'd end up with a very chewy piece of meat. Okay, and we don't want that. So if we cut against the grain for our slices, it's breaking it down. It's going to make it a little bit more tender. Okay, obviously you're going to need to cut with the grain at some point. I can't cut a piece of steak and put that on a taco. It's just too wide, right? So I'm going to cut straight down the middle at first. We have a nice medium rare on our steak, is what we're looking for, which is perfect. Okay, so, and now we're cutting against the grain. So we want to cut as thin as possible here, okay? We're going to eat this, and the thinner it is, the more tender it's going to be, the more luscious it's going to be, okay? So when you cut this, you can sort of see how textured it is. You see all those maybe sort of strains of beef running throughout the protein. So the longer these marinate, the more tender they become. A good piece of marinated flank steak should melt in your mouth. Okay, I'll go like this. Okay, so this is about, for one taco, it might be a little overboard, but I have 1, 2, 3, 4, about 6 to 7 slices there. Okay, now we'll go to the plating. Might be a little difficult. Yeah, it's definitely going to be difficult. Okay, so shell down. Okay, shell is down. I like to put a little bit. Let's grab a spoon. I like to put a little bit of the guacamole on the bottom, just to spread. And when you're building a taco, you also need to think about how it's going to be eaten, how it's going to taste, right? If we put a guacamole on the bottom, we ensure that we have a taste of guacamole throughout. Okay, add our steak. We have a steak there. I like to add a little bit of seasoning, finishing salt, that's just my personal preference. Okay, our steak, I'm going to go ahead and add a bit of our sauce just on top of the steak. Not too much, just a little bit. Okay. Then I'm going to take a bit of our pickled onions. Okay. Spread those out nicely. You have cabbage. This is where you could add cabbage or iceberg lettuce or anything you see fit. Add that on top of there. And then, just for a little fanciness, this is why we add the avocado to the bottom. You add a nice big scoop of avocado on top. Okay. For presentation, take a little bit more sauce, drizzle it all along. A few jalapenos. And then just a little lime wedge on the side. And if you wanted to, you could also, you'll see this a lot in Mexican restaurants. They have some coriander just sitting on the top. So I'll zoom out so you can see a little bit better. So again, just makes it look a little bit more fancy, and it's all just built in layers, right? Guacamole on the bottom, steak, a little bit of sauce, pickled onions, cabbage or lettuce, some guacamole, a little bit more sauce, and a lime wedge on the side. Just looks up a little bit more elegant, a little more upscale, a little more restaurant-like, you could say. But again, if you're eating by yourself, you don't need to do that. If you want to take pictures and show them off on social media, it's a good way to do it as well. But that's just one sort of way to jazz up and build your taco, right? It is a taco, it can only go so far, but that is how you jazz it up. So if I did a good job explaining, and we all had the right equipment, we all should have built relatively the same tacos, and they all should taste relatively the same. And you should have a wonderful lunch in store for you. One thing we've sort of talked about in the past is how do I stretch this meal and make it last longer? Well, with the exception of the guacamole, everything we've made today can last a long time. So how I would go ahead and stretch this is gonna meet here. Okay, so how I would go ahead and stretch this, I would certainly buy a little bit more steak, marinate the steak longer, cook it all at once, and then we have our pickled onions and our sauce that can be saved. I would go ahead and buy larger sort of wraps, like tortilla wraps, cook some rice and some beans, and then you can make burritos. Okay, you can make large burritos and stick them in your fridge or freeze them. Fridge, they would last 3 to 5 days. And if you were to freeze them and unthaw them, they could last in your freezer for give or take 2 to 3 months. So you can also make rice bowls. If you have the leftover steak, just cut the steak the exact same way. Have some rice, put some sauce on top with some pickled onions and any condiments that you like. And that will go a long way as well. So, yeah, so that's it from me today. Just kind of going over what we learned today. We learned a few techniques: mise en place, marinating, pickling, making the fancy restaurant style sauces, searing, cutting with the grain against the grain, and plating. So, yeah, that is all I have in store for you today. I do want to thank Brock and Liv for reaching out for this, and I hope everyone enjoyed, and we can do plenty more in the future. I certainly enjoy them. Again, I'm always open for questions. They both have my email, so if there's any questions that do come up, please feel free to ask and I will respond accordingly. So hope everyone enjoyed something today. Have a great lunch, and hopefully we'll see you all in the future.
Thanks so much, Eamonn.
Yes, of course.
I always love these classes. I was wondering if people wanted to show their dish, we would love to see them. You don't have to, but I just thought maybe if people would like to show, they could.
Yeah, of course. We did this in the last class too. So
hey,
yeah,
beautiful.
That looks very similar to mine. That's great. I like the tortillas too. They're wonderful. Yeah, that looks great. The steak looks very well cooked too.
Oh, gorgeous, Alicia. That looks so good.
Yeah, John said his was blood rare inside. So again, it comes down to a few things such as the size of the steak, your oven, and your pan. So it is hard to sort of justify when everyone's will be done. But the best route is to definitely get a thermometer for any future of cooking proteins. So
At least it's not chicken. There's that.
yeah, we won't want raw chicken. So
yeah.
Alrighty,
Excellent.
so,
Thank you,
yeah.
everyone, and thanks again, Eamon. This is fantastic.
Yes, of course. Yes, thank you all. Enjoy. Have a great rest of your Sunday, and hopefully we'll see you in the near future.
Yeah, thank you for cooking.
Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.